decades. Paul McCartney kept quiet about his tumultuous relationship with John Lennon. The rumors, the whispers, the speculation, all of it was fueled by McCartney's silence. Fans and the media were desperate for answers, but McCartney said nothing. That is, until now. What drove the legendary Beatle to speak out after so many years? What did McCartney finally reveal that made the world sit up and listen? The truth is, this isn't just a small confession. It's a deep dive into the untold story of their partnership, exposing things fans never could have imagined. What McCartney has shared isn't just shocking. It's a raw, unfiltered look at a relationship that shaped music history. For years, McCartney was content to let the past be the past. There were interviews, there were moments, but never an honest, comprehensive look at what really happened between him and Lennon. Now, in one bold move, McCartney opens the floodgates. The decades of silence made this revelation even more powerful. It's not just what he says, it's the fact that he's saying it now, after so much time. What was the breaking point? Why speak now? The answers come in McCartney's words, which challenge everything fans thought they knew about their relationship. The emotional weight of his confession isn't just in the facts, it's in the impact of McCartney's words. There's something deeply personal in his statement, something that goes beyond the public and the media. McCartney shares that silence was more than just a choice, it was a form of self-preservation. The pain of losing Lennon, the unresolved tension, all of it stayed with McCartney for years, and speaking now is his way of confronting those old wounds. This isn't about settling scores, it's about setting himself free. Even now, with the revelation out in the open, McCartney's words are still reverberating across the music world. Fans had been waiting for years for this kind of confession, but no one was prepared for the rawness of it. The details McCartney shares challenge the long-standing myth of Lennon's all-encompassing greatness and paints a far more complicated picture. McCartney's words aren't just an admission, they're a declaration that the truth, in all its complexity, is finally being brought to light. What triggered McCartney's bold decision to speak out? There was a point in McCartney's life when discussing Lennon wasn't even an option. The wounds were too fresh, the pain too raw. But then something shifted. What was it that pushed McCartney to break his silence after decades of keeping his feelings locked away? It wasn't an easy decision, and it wasn't a decision made lightly. McCartney's sudden willingness to open up is about more than just answering questions. It's about confronting a past that's been buried for far too long. What drove him to finally speak? Was it the growing pressure of never having said anything? Or was it something more personal, a need to finally lay the ghosts to rest? The catalyst for McCartney's decision is rooted in more than just external expectations. The turning point wasn't a public demand for the truth. It was something that touched McCartney on a deeply personal level. The realization that some stories need to be told in order for true healing to happen may have played a crucial role. McCartney wasn't just protecting Lennon's legacy by keeping quiet, he was protecting himself. But now that the truth is out, what does this mean for McCartney's own journey toward closure? Could this be the final chapter in a saga that has haunted him for years? McCartney's admission is not just a moment of clarity, it's a realization of his own vulnerability. The decision to finally speak about Lennon was about letting go of the fear that had controlled him for so long. What McCartney reveals isn't just about Lennon, it's about his relationship with himself and the demons he's been fighting in the shadows. By choosing to be open, McCartney takes a giant step forward in understanding the complexities of his past. This isn't just a confession, it's an act of liberation. The emotional weight of this decision can't be understated. McCartney reveals that his silence wasn't just a reaction to Lennon's death, it was his way of dealing with the fallout of their fallout. For years, McCartney couldn't face the idea of truly looking back at their relationship, afraid of what he might discover about himself and Lennon. But now, he feels ready. This is more than just setting the record straight. It's about McCartney's need for redemption, a chance to reconcile the conflicting emotions he's harbored for decades. This pivotal moment is as much about McCartney as it is about Lennon. In choosing to speak, McCartney invites fans into a more intimate understanding of the Beatles' complex dynamic. He's not just telling the world about Lennon's flaws, he's reflecting on his own. By doing so, McCartney shifts the narrative from a simple tale of fame and fortune to one of raw, human emotion. Now that McCartney has taken this step, there's no turning back. The floodgates are open, and there's no telling what other revelations might follow. McCartney's confession about Lennon's dark side, what he really felt. In a startling turn, McCartney opens up about a side of John Lennon that no one ever expected to hear about. The side that was far from the charismatic, rebellious icon so many remember. McCartney reveals that behind behind the public image of Lennon as a peace-loving, outspoken revolutionary, there was another side, a darker side that even McCartney struggled to reconcile with. This wasn't just about creative differences, it was about personal flaws that affected not only their music, but their friendship. Lennon, it turns out, wasn't the perfect visionary the world thought he was. McCartney reveals that Lennon's darker traits weren't just a minor part of their relationship, they were a constant undercurrent, shaping how McCartney saw him and how Lennon saw himself. As McCartney reflects on the years they spent together, he makes it clear that Lennon's faults weren't just occasional lapses. They were deeply ingrained in his personality, and they caused real harm to those around him. McCartney discusses moments of aggression, jealousy, and selfishness that often threatened to tear apart the fragile bond they shared. These aren't the traits of the icon that the world admired, but rather the traits of a man struggling with his own demons. McCartney admits that there were times when Lennon's actions made him question whether their friendship was ever as solid as he had believed. But it wasn't just Lennon's actions that hurt McCartney. The emotional toll of living in Lennon's shadow, constantly competing for recognition, left scars on McCartney that he never fully acknowledged until now. The deeper McCartney delves into the truth, the more it becomes clear that the dynamics of their partnership were far more toxic than fans have been led to believe. The toll of working with someone who was both a friend and a rival took a psychological toll on McCartney, a toll that stayed with him long after the Beatles broke up. McCartney's revelations about Lennon's darker side don't just change the way we view their relationship, they change the way we view Lennon. For years, the public celebrated Lennon's legacy without fully acknowledging the impact of his behavior on those closest to him. McCartney's confession shatters that illusion, replacing it with a more complex and perhaps more tragic reality. The man we once saw as a hero becomes humanized, flawed, and, in some ways, even broken. The moment McCartney realized their friendship was over. In a heart-wrenching revelation, McCartney recounts the exact moment when he realized that his friendship with John Lennon was irreparably broken. It wasn't an argument, nor was it some dramatic public fallout. It was something far more personal, a moment of pure betrayal that shattered any hope McCartney had of rekindling their bond. The moment McCartney describes is an intense flashback to a time when everything they once shared seemed to dissolve in an instant. The weight of that moment still lingers in McCartney's mind, and his honesty about it will leave you questioning the foundation of the Beatles' legendary partnership. As McCartney recalls the events leading up to this turning point, he opens up about the emotional turmoil of realizing that someone he trusted so deeply had fundamentally changed. It wasn't just about creative differences, it was the erosion of a once unshakable friendship. McCartney felt the walls closing in as Lennon's actions and words pushed him further and further away, until the idea of reconciliation seemed impossible. The pain McCartney felt wasn't just about losing a bandmate, it was about losing the person he thought was a true friend. This isn't just a breakup of a band, it's a personal, emotional betrayal that cut deeper than most people can imagine. But what exactly happened that caused this rift? McCartney doesn't hold back in detailing the event that marked the turning point. It wasn't a single incident, but a series of events that culminated in one devastating realization. Lennon wasn't the person McCartney thought he was. The trust was broken in such a way that McCartney could never look at their relationship the same again. The sheer weight of the betrayal left McCartney questioning not only his friendship with Lennon, but also the future of the Beatles themselves. The aftermath of this revelation is hard to ignore. For years, McCartney had to face the harsh reality that their relationship could never go back to what it once was. And even as Lennon's tragic death loomed in the background, McCartney couldn't escape the emotional scars left by that turning point. It's clear that McCartney's reflections on this moment are filled with regret, but also with a sense of closure. He may never get back the friendship they once had, but now he can finally speak his truth. Lennon's darker side exposed. The image of John Lennon as a peace-loving, idealistic figure has been immortalized in the public eye. But what if that image is only half of the story? McCartney's candid reflection on Lennon's personality reveals that Lennon wasn't just the outspoken, rebellious genius he was often portrayed as. He was also deeply troubled, and at times, downright difficult. McCartney's honest recollection of Lennon's more troublesome traits will leave fans reeling as they come to terms with the fact that Lennon's greatness came at a price. Behind Lennon's charismatic exterior was a man who struggled with profound inner demons. McCartney opens up about the times when Lennon's behavior crossed the line, leaving him and others feeling hurt and disillusioned. This isn't a bitter attack, it's an honest look at a complicated person who had his own battles. But McCartney doesn't shy away from the truth, painting a picture of a Lennon who could be cruel, temperamental, and even selfish. The candid nature of McCartney's thoughts on Lennon's darker side is a far cry from the image the public has long held dear. McCartney's revelations aren't just shocking, they're painful. McCartney, for all his talent, was a victim of Lennon's mood swings, his occasional recklessness, and his tendency to push those closest to him away. McCartney describes moments where Lennon's behavior not only hurt him personally, but also damaged their professional relationship. Lennon's flaws weren't just part of his character, they were part of the reason why the Beatles fell apart. McCartney's reflections on Lennon's struggles humanize the legend, but they also show the destructive nature of his behavior, which was often overlooked by the public. But why did McCartney never speak out before? For years, he kept his thoughts to himself, unsure how the world would react to his portrayal of Lennon. It wasn't just about protecting Lennon's legacy, it was about McCartney not wanting to tarnish the memories of their shared musical triumphs. However, now, with the distance of time, McCartney feels ready to share the truth about the darker side of their friendship. As painful as it is, McCartney understands that revealing this side of Lennon is essential to understanding the full story of the Beatles. McCartney's candid admission forces us to reconsider our view of Lennon and the Beatles as a whole. The myth of Lennon as a perfect, noble figure starts to crumble when we see the flaws that were hidden beneath the surface. But McCartney doesn't regret his time with Lennon, despite the pain. In fact, these revelations only make the music they created together even more powerful. Because now, we understand the emotional cost behind their genius. McCartney's confession about what went wrong. The breakup of the Beatles has been one of the most iconic and talked about events in music history. But McCartney's confession reveals something far deeper than what fans have been led to believe. For years, the public blamed McCartney for the breakup, casting him as the villain in a story that was more complex than anyone knew. In his personal confession, McCartney reveals that the real cause of the Beatles' demise was not one person's fault. It was a series of issues that had been building for years. What really went wrong between the Beatles? The answer is far more layered than just ego and creative differences. McCartney walks us through the final days of the Beatles with a level of honesty that is both refreshing and heartbreaking. He discusses the emotional strain that the band members felt as they tried to balance fame, creativity, and personal lives. Tensions were high, and as the years went on, McCartney realized that the cracks in their relationships were impossible to ignore. The conflicts weren't just about music, they were about personal betrayals, misunderstandings, and dreams that no longer aligned. McCartney's confession isn't just about the dissolution of the Beatles, it's about how each of them dealt with the collapse of something they had once cherished. As McCartney reflects on the breakup, it becomes clear that the Beatles' split wasn't as dramatic as the public believed. There were no grand fights or dramatic moments. It was a quiet unraveling, a slow burn that led to inevitable separation. McCartney admits that part of him knew the end was near, but even he couldn't fully comprehend the emotional toll it would take on him. The realization that his bandmates had moved on, mentally and emotionally, was devastating for McCartney, and it marked the beginning of his own journey toward understanding what the Beatles truly meant to him. The emotional weight of McCartney's confession is impossible to ignore. He never wanted to be the one to bring about the end of the Beatles, but circumstances and personal struggles made it clear that the band could not continue as it once had. The heartache of watching the Beatles fall apart from within is a pain McCartney still carries. This confession adds a layer of complexity to the narrative of the Beatles' breakup, one that challenges the simplistic view that it was all about one person's actions. In the wake of the Beatles' collapse, McCartney had to face not only the loss of a band, but the loss of a dream. The emotional scars left by the breakup affected McCartney in ways that he's only now able to fully express. But in sharing these truths, McCartney also finds a sense of closure. The Beatles may have been destroyed by internal conflict, but McCartney's journey of understanding and self-reflection is just beginning. Did he ever forgive him? After everything that happened between them, did Paul McCartney ever truly forgive John Lennon? McCartney has always been known for his grace, but this question weighs heavily on his heart. In an emotional and reflective moment, McCartney opens up about his final thoughts on Lennon and whether he was ever able to truly forgive his former bandmate for the way their relationship ended. The answer is both powerful and heartbreaking. McCartney's words are filled with a sense of closure, but also with an undercurrent of unresolved pain. Was there ever a chance for reconciliation? Or did the wounds run too deep for forgiveness to be possible? McCartney takes us through the complex emotions he felt after Lennon's untimely death. While Lennon may have been gone, the emotional burden he left behind remained with McCartney, and the years of silence only served to make that burden heavier. But through all the pain, McCartney ultimately found a form of peace. He shares that it was only after years of reflection that he realized forgiveness wasn't about excusing Lennon's behavior, it was about releasing the emotional grip that the past had on him. McCartney's words on this topic reveal just how much he has struggled with this question over the years, and how he came to terms with the idea that some things, no matter how hard you try, can never truly be fixed. Forgiveness is not a simple concept, especially when it comes to someone as important as John Lennon. McCartney's journey of understanding what happened between them and how he processed the end of their relationship is as complex as the music they created together. Even Even after everything, McCartney understands that forgiveness isn't just about the other person, it's about healing yourself. In this deeply personal reflection, McCartney reveals that he came to realize that Lennon's death wasn't just an end, it was a new beginning for McCartney's own emotional journey. Lennon's legacy and the memories McCartney holds are full of contradictions, love and pain, creativity and conflict. McCartney shares that he now sees Lennon's flaws as part of what made him who he was, a complicated genius whose actions sometimes hurt those around him. Forgiveness wasn't about erasing those flaws. It was about accepting them and finding a way to move forward. It's clear that McCartney's thoughts on Lennon have evolved, and his ability to forgive has been an integral part of his own healing process. The question of forgiveness isn't just about McCartney and Lennon, it's about the human experience. McCartney's words invite us to think about our own relationships, the complexities we face, and the healing that comes from accepting others' flaws. McCartney may never fully reconcile with his past, but through his forgiveness, he has found peace in a way that few others can understand. The Lennon legacy. John Lennon's legacy is one that has shaped the world, influencing generations with his music, ideas, and activism. But how does Paul McCartney, the other half of the Beatles, feel about Lennon's legacy now that time has passed and wounds have healed? McCartney's perspective on Lennon's lasting influence is filled with complexity, mixing admiration with resentment, love with regret. As he reflects on Lennon's impact on both their lives and the world at large, McCartney admits that it's difficult to reconcile the man he knew with the icon the world reveres. The Lennon many fans celebrate is a far cry from the Lennon McCartney once knew. McCartney shares that while he has always respected Lennon's work and his contributions to both music and society, he can't help but feel conflicted. Lennon's voice may have been a beacon for peace, but McCartney reveals that in their personal relationship, Lennon was often self-centered, manipulative, and distant. These complexities don't negate Lennon's genius, but they complicate McCartney's feelings toward the legacy he's left behind. While many fans idolize Lennon for his post-Beatles activism and his outspoken views on peace, McCartney can't forget the man who was often difficult to deal with, both personally and professionally. In reflecting on Lennon's legacy, McCartney also grapples with his own role in shaping that legacy. As one of the Beatles' most prolific songwriters, McCartney acknowledges that the partnership between him and Lennon defined much of what the world knows about the Beatles. But with Lennon's tragic death, McCartney was forced to carry that legacy forward on his own. This responsibility has been a heavy burden for McCartney, who has always felt that his own creative contributions were often overshadowed by Lennon's image. Despite all the pain, McCartney doesn't shy away from the fact that Lennon's influence on him was profound. He confesses that, even with all the tension between them, there were moments of pure brilliance, moments that could never be recreated. McCartney's mixed emotions about Lennon's legacy are a testament to the complicated relationship they shared, one that spanned decades of creativity, conflict, and eventually, sorrow. Lennon's legacy may live on in the music they created together, but McCartney's own feelings remain tangled in the complexities of their friendship. At the end of the day, McCartney concludes that Lennon's legacy will always be a part of his life, whether he likes it or not. The music, the memories, the conflict, it's all intertwined. McCartney's reflections reveal a man at peace with his past, but still carrying the weight of their shared history. Lennon may have left the world too soon, but his influence on McCartney, both personally and professionally, will never fade. What McCartney wishes had happened differently. The breakup of the Beatles is one of the most famous events in rock history, but what would have happened if things had gone differently? Paul McCartney looks back at the split with a mixture of regret and understanding. He admits that there were things he wished he had done differently, moments where he could have fought harder to keep the band together. The breakup wasn't just a professional separation, it was a personal loss that still affects McCartney to this day. While he understands why it happened, he can't help but wonder what the Beatles could have accomplished had they stuck together a little longer. McCartney's thoughts on the split reveal a man who isn't just looking back at a moment of failure, but at a lost opportunity. He reflects on the ways he could have tried harder to bridge the growing divides between the band members. If he could go back in time, what would he have done differently? Would he have been able to prevent the irreparable rift between him and Lennon? McCartney admits that he carried the blame for years, but now he sees that the breakup was a product of many factors, not just his own actions. The regrets are there, but they are tempered by an understanding of the inevitability of change. Despite the pain of the Beatles' split, McCartney shares that there were also moments of growth. The breakup allowed him to develop as an artist in ways that may not have been possible had the band stayed together. The personal challenges McCartney faced post-Beatles forced him to evolve, both musically and emotionally. But even as he embraced his solo career, McCartney never forgot the unique magic of the Beatles. The collaboration between him and Lennon was something that couldn't be replicated, and no matter how successful McCartney became, there was always a part of him that longed for the days when the Beatles were a unified force. In his reflections, McCartney acknowledges that the Beatles' breakup was a painful painful yet necessary chapter in their story. The band had already reached its creative peak, and perhaps there was nowhere else for them to go. McCartney's thoughts on what might have been reveal a sense of bittersweet nostalgia for the band's golden years. As he navigates his own solo career, McCartney understands that the Beatles' legacy will always be tied to both his success and his regrets. McCartney concludes that the Beatles' story is a complicated one, filled with highs, lows, and missed opportunities. But no matter what, their music remains timeless, and that is something that McCartney cherishes. The split may have broken the band, but it also created a legacy that will live on forever. But even with all the darkness and heartache, McCartney's words leave us with hope, a reminder that even the deepest wounds can heal, even if the scars remain. As we continue to reflect on their legacy, the real question is, what does this revelation mean for how we view the Beatles' history? McCartney's candidness has left an indelible mark on their story. Let us know your thoughts on McCartney's confession. Do you think he's finally gotten the closure he needed, or is there more to the story? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth insights into the lives of the stars who shaped music history.